Hey, this is Sarah with Tenderfoot Village, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to make this precious little elf gnome ornament. Be sure and check the description box below this video for a complete list of the supplies I used. The first thing I'm going to do is cut off one finger out of this glove, and I'm going to cut off 2 pieces of twine, and I'm going to tie a knot at one end of each of these. Once I have my knot tied on both of the pieces of string, I'm going to trim off the excess from the ends of them. Then I'm going to take my yarn needle and I'm going to thread the twine through it about halfway. I'm going to insert it on one end of the gloved finger, and I'm going to pull it mostly through, but I'm going to grab a hold of that knot so that I don't pull it all the way through, and I'm going to gently pull the thread the rest of the way through. I'm going to do that for both pieces of thread so they create legs, and then once I get those all the way pulled through, I'm going to turn it inside out with my finger, apply some hot glue, let it set for a moment, and then turn it back right side out. Next, I'm going to grab a cotton ball and I'm going to roll it around in my hand a little bit to kind of elongate it, and then I'm going to stick it inside of that glove finger, which is going to be our body. Now I'm ready to add the arms using the same method I used to start the legs. Only this time, once I've inserted the arms, I'm going to hot glue them in place and then seal the top closed with hot glue. Now I'm ready to add the beard, but you could actually wait to do this step until after you've finished the feet. I kind of wish that I would have, that way the beard is not getting in my way when I'm trying to tie off everything and wrap everything. You really only need a very small square of the faux fur material, just enough to fit in between that space between the arms. Now that I have my square cut, I'm actually going to go ahead and cut it into the shape of a kind of a triangle. Now that I have my beard piece cut, I'm going to check it and see if I like the way that it looks on the body. And once I like it, I'm going to hot glue it onto the body. Now I'm ready to tie the knots that are going to be my feet or my ankles. And so I'm just going to tie the knot on the first one, and I'm doing this about 2 1/4 inches long. But I'm just going to tie that knot on that first one, and then I'm going to kind of line up the second one, and you'll see me kind of slowly work that loose knot closer to tight. And you can kind of move it. That's one cool thing about twine, is you can kind of move it until you pull it really tight. Once I like where the knots are at, I'm going to trim off the excess once I've pulled them tight. And then I'm going to move on to the arms. And for this, I like to measure, I like the string to hit just below the base of the body. And I'm then going to use the first one that I cut and kind of help me guide where to cut the second one. Now we're ready to move on to the shoes. And to attach the shoes, I like the knot to hit at the heel of that little shoe. And here in a moment I'll lift it up and I'll show you up close when I apply the hot glue, so you can kind of see there is a dip inside of that shoe. But just for this first one, I am applying a little dot of hot glue into that little dip, and I'm putting the knot towards the heel, and then I'm lifting up um, so that it kind of turns that twine upward. So again, you can see here, I'm going to apply that dot of hot glue and then stick that little knot to the back, to the heel part of that shoe, and then I lift the twine upward so that it creates kind of that leg look. Now I'm ready to wrap my little shoe, so I'm using the length of the shoe to help me measure so that I have a good idea of how big I want the shoes to actually be. And I'm just cutting off some felt, and then I'm going to cut that felt in half, and I'm going to save the excess for the hands later. But I'm just going to begin wrapping it the same way I do the pointy shoes or any of my little baby shower booty shoes. So to wrap the shoes, I'm going to start at the back, and I actually like that it's attached to the string already. If I was to try and just wrap the shoe on its own, I think it would be more difficult. Having the string gives me a little bit more to hold on to because they're so small. But I'm just going to start at the back, and I'm applying a little bit of hot glue down at the bottom along the line of the shoe, and I'm just using the table to help guide me and rolling my shoe around on that hot glue. And I'm just trying to make sure it stays even, and I like to allow a little bit of overhang on the felt, so I go a little bit past the end of the shoe. Now I've made it back around to the back, so I'm just going to apply some hot glue in a line and just finish off the shoe, cut off my excess. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other shoe. And this time I moved the camera just a little bit so you can see more clearly what I'm doing. But I'm just starting at the back and going to apply that hot glue around the edge, keeping in mind that I like to have a little bit of overhang. And I'm just going to go all the way around. And when I get to the back, I'm going to finish it off and cut off my excess. Now that I have both feet done, I'm going to do the similar concept to what I do with the witch's shoes or the pointy shoes. I'm cutting down at an angle from the front end of the shoe and giving myself enough room from that twine to kind of create that boot look. So I'm cutting down at an angle, and then on the other side I'm going in straight down. So you can see straight down. Now that I have them cut, for the little tiny guys, I like to tuck in and kind of tightly wrap the straighted part, so to kind of hug the twine is what I'm going for. So I'm just adding a little bit of hot glue, and then I'm just going to tuck that felt around the twine, and I'm going to do this for both sides. After I've wrapped the leg or ankle part, I'm going to move on to the toe, and I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue inside of that and just pinch it closed. And you can see I'm kind of manipulating it to try and kind of create that shape. I'm going to trim off a little bit more of that point because it wasn't quite elf shoeing enough for me. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other shoe. Once I get to the toe, adding a little dot of hot glue in there, pinching it, and I squeezed out a little bit of hot glue on top, so I'm just going to trim that off and trim a little bit of the material so that it's even with the other shoe. Now I'm going to grab a piece of adhesive felt, and I'm using black. I believe I got this at Hobby Lobby. And I'm just going to take one of those extra baby shower shoes that I have, and I'm just tracing the outline of the shoe onto the back side of that adhesive felt. Once I get them traced, I'm going to cut them out and begin sticking them to the bottom of the shoe. Now that I have the bottom of both shoes done, I'm ready to move on to the hat. And I'm taking a little bit of polyfill and I'm tucking it up inside the hat just to give it a little bit of fuller stiffness. And then I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue around the inside edge and then glue the hat onto the top of his head. Now I'm ready to add the nose, and for the size of the bead, you can find that in the description. But I'm just adding a little dot of hot glue and tucking that nose up inside underneath that hat. I'm ready to begin working on the hands now, so I'm just taking that scrap material, folding it over so I can do two at the same time, and I'm cutting like a long mitten without a thumb. I guess that'd be the best way to kind of have that in your mind. It's just kind of a long mitten without a thumb, and I'm just keeping them both together so that they look the same when they're done. But I'm just rounding off the edges that weren't quite rounded. And then once I get it to where I like it, I'm ready to hot glue them onto the twine hands. I decided to wait a little bit on finishing the hands because I wanted to finish the shoes first. So I'm going to wrap the bottom of the shoes with this thin red ribbon. This is an 1/8 of an inch size, and I'm just going to go along the bottom, trying to keep it straight, and applying a little bit of hot glue along the way. Not too much, but a little bit, and just applying that ribbon all the way around on the bottom of both shoes. So I kind of made a little bit of a mess when I was applying the ribbon with the hot glue, so I'm just going to clean that up with my heat gun. So what I'm doing is just reactivating that glue so it changes to clear and not looking white anymore, so you no longer will see it. I don't care for the yellow ball on the top of the hat, so I'm going to take my heat gun and just reactivate that hot glue that was used to put it on and make it come off. And I'm going to just get rid of it and apply my own gold ball to the top of the head. To do that, I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and puncture a little bit of that ball, which I got at the Dollar Tree. And so I'm just puncturing it, and then I'm going to kind of scrape out the inside. It is made out of styrofoam, so it's very easy to do. Once I've done that, I can fill in the inside of that spot with hot glue. I'm doing the same thing on the other two balls for the shoes. It just makes it easier for them to sit onto those tips of those shoes. At this point, I thought I was going to use this candy cane, so I began prepping for the candy cane, but then I wanted to do something different, so I found a little Christmas tree ornament that I got at Hobby Lobby and decided to go with it instead. So you'll see me kind of walk through the process initially of using the candy cane, and then I switch over to the Christmas tree. But right now I am working on applying the hands, so I'm taking a little bit of hot glue and applying it to the back end of the hand and then adding it to the tip of that twine. And I'm going to squeeze that around so it kind of creates a mitten look, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a second. This part was a little bit messy, so I'm grabbing my heat gun and just kind of reactivating a little bit of that glue to turn it clear instead of white so you no longer see it. And I'm continuing to wrap that little hand around, that little mitten around. On the second hand, I noticed that the twine was unraveled a little bit, so I'm just going to take my hot glue gun and apply a little bit of hot glue and twist to get it to lay back down. Then I'm going to apply that mitten the same way I did the first one. So this is where I decided to change my mind on what he was going to be holding, and I grabbed that Christmas tree. So this is, again, just a little ornament I got at the Hobby Lobby. It comes in a set of like 4 or 6, I think. But now I'm just kind of playing with the placement, seeing how I want him to hold it. And once I've decided how I want him to hold it, then I'm just going to add hot glue to help me achieve that hold. So this is pretty much it. He's finished as an ornament, but I decided to add a little brooch pin, like a fastener to the back of him. So that's what the next little bit of this video is just me adding that little pin to the back. And there's the pin, and I got a big bag of these at Hobby Lobby, and I'm just figuring out the placement real quick. Going to apply some hot glue and then just glue it right onto the back of him. And I'm doing it with the clasp facing downwards instead of upwards up into his hat. I was afraid that the hat might get in the way of me being able to clasp it on and off. I noticed that I didn't add any trim around the ankles of his boots, so I decided to do that at the very end. And that's what I'm doing here, is just adding a little bit of that trim all the way around both boots, and that will be the last thing I do to finish him off. Well, that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.